Hello, everyone. I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of FP&A Webinars. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, FP&A Success in 2020 and Beyond, Benchmarks, Challenges, and Empowerment. I would like to thank our webinar partner today for today's webinar, Centage, who shares our commitment to thought leadership and to serving the Treasury, Finance, and FP&A professions. Despite the emergence of big data and all the recent advancements in technology, most companies still fail to conquer the last mile of FP&A, impacting performance across the enterprise. What are the most relevant current and emerging trends and best practices in FP&A? How do companies empower FP&A leaders to serve as trusted advisors across the enterprise on strategic and operational decisions? Today you'll discover how to help your FP&A function offer more strategic value, best practices for dynamic planning, trends in technology and business partnering, and insights from compelling FP&A-focused surveys. Before I delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about FP&A webinars, cover a few housekeeping items, and then review our learning objectives as they offer the pillars of my value proposition to you for investing an hour of your valuable time to attend our webinar today. At FP&A Webinars, we offer webinars and virtual events designed to empower FP&A success at companies of all sizes across all industries. We only do what we do best, virtual events. Now for the exciting housekeeping items. For any of you interested in receiving CTP or FP&A credit for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all the polling questions, remain online for the duration of the webinar, and complete the post-webinar survey, which will launch immediately at the conclusion of the webinar today. If you have any questions on CTP or FP&A credit, or would like a copy of today's presentation slides, please send an email to Ernie@360thoughtleadership.com. Again, that's Ernie@360thoughtleadership.com. I'd love to hear from you today, and I can take your questions at any time in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. Speaking of hearing, the webinar is best experienced if you are listening via a telephone, and sometimes we have a little bit of an issue with experiencing the audio on the computer, so I strongly recommend that you use your phone line. However, if you're not able to do so, I'm happy to offer you a link to the webinar recording, which will have a much more crisp sound. Finally, I appreciate everyone's consideration in taking a short survey at the end of the webinar today, as we always strive to improve the ROI of our event attendees for their valuable time. Now, for our learning objectives for today. After the webinar today, I want you to be able to understand the implications of recent FP&A related research, and what I mean by that is directly to your company. Assess where your company stands relative to data maturity, analytical capabilities, and business partnering. So we need to be able to assess where we're at, where we want to go, and then today, hopefully, we'll help you get access to some resources and best practices that will help you make the journey to optimizing the value of FP&A at your company. And finally, and probably most importantly, I'd like you to identify specific opportunities to improve the strategic value that FP&A and finance deliver at your company. So what's our roadmap for our time together today? Well, I'm going to review global FP&A research and also talk about some of the key implications. And then we'll talk about how to assess data maturity and data truth. Data truth is really a key foundation of FP&A success, and I think we still have a long way to go. And then we'll talk about driver-based planning and the art of business intelligence and how to leverage technology and delivering analysis that impacts decisions. So what I'll do is I'll take the survey results, say what they mean, but also bring things back to what do teams need to do to deliver value from FP&A in 2020 and beyond. And then part of that, which I don't think gets enough attention, we'll talk about how to create a culture of FP&A success. A key theme to me in really delivering value from finance is going to be technology and relationships, and we'll talk about that. And then we'll wrap things up with some closing thoughts. And so let's start diving in. I was honored to be involved in the 2019 FP&A Empowerment Survey. I worked with a few fellow thought leaders, Larissa Melnichuk, the CEO of FP&A Trends. They have some great content, and also a good friend of mine, James Myers from the FP&A Consulting Group. And so this is the second time that we've done the survey. And so this is really a global survey that goes out to FP&A and finance leaders across the globe. And just to give you some context and really to show you why I'm confident making some generalizations based on the survey results. So we have a very robust country distribution. So we had 46%. I believe we had right around 300 observations, folks to fill out the survey, just for your information. So we had 46% in North America. We had 34% in Europe, 10% in Asia Pacific, 5% in Middle East and Africa, and South and Central America. So you see that we have a really good distribution across really across the globe. And then we also have, I think, a really good distribution across industries. So we have software and tech, 16%. We've got manufacturing, banking, financial services, telecom. So we've actually got quite a few industries that are over 5% and even 4%, close to 5%. So I'm really happy with that. I'm also very happy with the distribution across the annual revenue space. And so we've got 21% here at the 1 billion to 5 billion and greater than 5 billion. So we've got probably 42% at that really enterprise level. And then we've got a really good swath in that mid-market space. Obviously, that's pretty big, 25 to 100 and even 100 to 499, so all the way up here. And then we still have 10% represented at that $25 million or less. Also extremely happy about the title distribution. And so we've got a good mix of finance leaders. So we have categories. We had some general categories: senior finance leader, senior FP&A leader, specifically called out, CFO, finance leader, maybe more of a manager level, FP&A leader, more of a manager level. We have our controller, and then we have 7% as financial professionals. So you see we've got a pretty good mix of folks that are really involved in the strategic decision making in terms of FP&A, but also are really close enough to the ground to really understand what's going on. So the key themes of the survey results, and one of the things that I like to say overall, it just gives us a good assessment of kind of where we're at. So I think we have a lot of perceptions about where we're at. There's all these great things going on in FP&A, and we've all come a long way. And I think this is a little bit of a reality check for me. Now, not that the future is not bright, not that there's not a lot of companies out there that are really doing a lot of good work, but I think it speaks to the need for us to continue to focus on educating companies of all sizes on how to leverage technology and education in order to really remove what I see are a lot of inherent barriers to FP&A success. And I think one of the biggest ones that I see is time misallocation. So the first theme that I talk about is time misallocation. It's an epidemic. And so, of course, we aspire to be more strategic, but FP&A teams across the world are investing too much time on the wrong FP&A activities, and we'll get into some specific research that backs that up. So if you don't do this at this point, I would strongly encourage you to really dive in and talk to your folks about how much time they're spending on certain activities, things such as collecting data, validating data, pulling data from your systems, what time you spending on analysis, creating reports, writing reports, and so you can really see where there's opportunities for you to do better. And so I think what you'll probably find out is that there's not a lot of time spent on high value activities. And then one of the good news is that leveraging the right technology allows you to mitigate a lot of those time spent on those activities. And the other part of that is technology done right that allows robust scenario analysis really allows you to offer more value and really to communicate with impact. And impact, I mean influencing decisions across the enterprise. And so the other theme is companies lack the right data and data truth. So really companies are still struggling mightily to get the data and align on a single version of data truth. And so that's really the foundation now. There's a whole probably 6 webinars that can be done on what's the right data, but I think that's something that kind of we need to level set on. So what's the right data? What are the things that really move the needle for your company? And we'll talk about that later. What are the drivers of company success, departmental success? And so we need to be careful that we don't have data overload. And so if we're looking at the right data and not having data overload, so we look at achieving data truth becomes much more possible as long as we're looking, I would say, data that matters. Technological maturity is still rampant, and so there's nothing short of amazing at the general lack of technology maturity of companies across all sizes and across all industries. I think there's no doubt FP&A value is being inhibited by technological maturity. One of the results I think that'll really stand out to folks is really how much companies struggle just to do any sort of robust scenario analysis. But the good news is, right, you guys being kind of negative today, executives do understand the value of FP&A. And so the level of executive buy-in for the current potential value of FP&A to deliver growth and business agility, it bodes well and is encouraging. As we all well know, that's really something that we really need out of the gate. So I think I would say that the stage is set for companies to place more strategic focus in unlocking the value of FP&A for their companies. And so we've got a lot of work to do in a lot of areas. However, we seem to have that executive support, and I think a lot of thought leaders have done a really good job in educating folks. And I think the companies are really starting to focus on the value of FP&A and really starting to focus on leveraging FP&A to enable that business agility, which is critical in today's world. So let's go back and dive in a little bit on these themes. And so the first one I talked about was the FP&A time allocation. I think it's just an epidemic. So first we'll look at some results from the 2019 FP&A Empowerment Survey. And so you see, right, time spent on activities, we got low, medium, and high activities. And so we currently, right, how much time do we spend on low value activities? 41%, right? How much time do we spend on high value activities? 23%, right? Your first thought is going to be, wow, we can do better than that. And so I think this is an exercise that you would do well to go through. And it's not that it's the end of the world. If your numbers are here or even less, it's going to be something that's going to be, wow, it's a wake up call and say, wow, what are we doing here? How are we doing things? What's the low hanging fruit? And then we have desired time. And so I think this is kind of good. You might expect this 56% number to be higher, but this 31% really speaks to the fact that there are just certain blocking and tackling things that we need to do from FP&A. But again, there's a huge gap here between what we're doing and what we'd like to be doing. And again, I think when you start to look at what's driving some of these low value activities, you're going to see you're going to have some manual processes. You're going to have some inefficient, again, technology and process use. And so you'll start to see you really need to get visibility into those processes as well. So we need technology to help us do that. So we can ask people what they're doing, but also on the technology front, let's see a thing we're trying to accomplish, and let's be able to see what are the bottlenecks along the way. So we really need to define our time, and then we really need to own our time as well. And so just kind of some ancillary points here where your analytics time is spent, and I would argue that time spent on analytics is a high value activity, right? But you look at what companies call data analytics, which I don't think some of these things are analytics, but it's just the way that it's defined commonly. But how much time is spent, look how much time we're spending on data collection, data validation. We only spend 6% driving actions. And so we should be spending, in my mind, the majority of our time driving actions and generating insights. And so you just start to see, okay, this is where I see part of my pie. This is my 100% pie, how much time is being spent on what I would call analytics, right? Define it in these terms. And then we want to see how our time is being allocated. And so you start to see that we've got a lot of room. And I think what you'll find is that, and the majority of you on the webinar, what you'll find is your teams are spending a lot of time on collection and validation and not enough time on driving actions. And then just to speak on the inefficiencies that we have in terms of getting done, which I see, and it's a great undertaking, but it's still blocking and tackling. So our attendees, 3 to 6 months on the budget, right? 1 to 3 months, 50%. Only 11% of us 1 month or less. And so, of course, you can say I'm at a huge enterprise company. We're billions of dollars, trillion, hundreds of billions of dollars. But I would argue that if you have the right technology and process in place, you can get this done in a month or less. So so it just kind of speaks to, across the world and across company sizes where we can see some misallocation. Then we see time spent on a forecast. We still see an awful lot of people in this greater than 5 days. So we got 31%, 40%, almost 50% takes 5 to 10 business days, right? And so in an ideal world, if we really had robust scenario analysis, we'd be able to do this in a day, at the most 1 to 2 days. And so just kind of to show where that time misallocation is going. And then some results from another great survey that I encourage you to read as well, Preparing for the Next Level of FP&A, a survey which was conducted in collaboration between the APQC and the AFP. APQC, if you've never been to their website, they have some tremendous benchmarking data and really some industry-specific benchmarking data. So I encourage you, and the AFP is the Association for Financial Professionals, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. If you want more information on how to get access to this survey or how to get connected with the APQC, just let me know. An interesting result here. This survey reports 75% of time is reported gathering or administering the process, as opposed to conducting value-added analysis. And so APQC has been asking this question year over year for several years, and this really hasn't changed. And so part of it is we have visibility, we recognize the problem, but I think all these things really speak to that theme. So in looking at kind of the lay of the land globally, where we're at, and then helping you benchmark yourself a little bit where you might be, I think these results are important. The message is that we need to pay a lot of attention to where we're spending our time, and then as we start to dive in, we can start to say, okay, let's have a target for how much time we're going to spend, and then let's make sure that we're doing it, and then let's start to do maybe an ROI analysis for our time. Before we dive into the next theme, which is really around data, I just strongly believe data is the foundation of FP&A success. Without the right data, it's hard to deliver value. So it kind of goes back to the old term, garbage in, garbage out. A few little cartoons here to give us a little levity. So the boss says use a CBS database to size a market. Guy says that data is wrong. Then you use the CBS database. The data is also wrong. Can you average them? Sure, you can multiply them too. And so this really gets to the point where sometimes we just don't have the right attitude about data. So we need to make sure we have the right data. We can't just start massaging data, manipulating data, and looking at make like something that we want it to look like. At the end of the day, the data is either quality or it's not. Along the same lines, are you sure the data you gave me is correct? I've been giving you the incorrect data for years. This is the first time you've asked. What? I said the data is totally accurate. And so I think that we need to get away from just accepting that the data is right. And let's make sure that we all understand where the data is coming from, the quality, and then also understand that we're looking at the right data. So do we need this data? What data do we need? Is there additional data that we need? And then if we can't get the data that we need, what's the best proxy that we have? And let's all be sure that we understand the limitations in making inferences from that data. And so, I call this data truth or reality. And so we look at data availability. So what I call data nirvana, right data, right time, right people. Only 10% of survey respondents said they have data nirvana. We had 47% say they're working on it. 24% say they get it, but it's not timely. So at the best case, we've got only 25% of companies that ever get access to the right data. And so this just speaks to the fact that we have a lot more ways to go. If we look at questions around data maturity and most challenging analytics issues, and so the big challenge here, no single source of data truth, right, that people trust, right? It has to be right, and people have to trust it. So those can be two different things. Everyone is working offline in Excel, too many inconsistent taxonomy and decisions. So that speaks to the fact that we need to have a data culture, put some formal rules around data, too much complexity in financial data. I would say you're probably not looking at the right data, and then it's out of date. So you look at the blocking and tackling. So one, we don't have a version of the truth. And part of that is because we're working in Excel and because we don't have the structure on that. So you can see these things are really interrelated, but it also might be interesting for you to do some like internal surveys, right? Those involved in the FP&A process. And maybe you go to your departmental managers, things that they'd like to see. Do you feel that we're looking at the right data? You have the right data to inform us on your budgets and planning. So that would be interesting as well. And then we say some in analytical issues. Only 30% of folks report the data is only turned into information or insight, but often used to drive action. So we're not driving actions. 32% say they have access to the relevant data. That doesn't mean it's timely. And so just some interesting survey results around really what the data truth here is across the globe. So let me go ahead and launch our first polling question here today. I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions today. Those of you interested in receiving CTP or FP&A credits, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions here today. So I'm asking you to share with me. Don't worry, I won't tell on you for your results. They're asking you to share with me if you believe you have one version of data truth at your company. So maybe you're like, yes, we do absolutely agree, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree, or maybe you don't know. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another 10 or 15 seconds or so we can get on with our content. And then I'll go ahead and give us a quick peek at the results, and then I'll make any comments that I see relative to what I've been seeing, and not only in the research that I've been doing the past couple of years, but the research that I always keep my eyes out for throughout the year. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple more seconds. And then, all right, so let's go ahead and share the results. And so I'm happy to see that 10% of you strongly agree. So we've got 55% of you somewhat agree. So we still got maybe 36 to 40% of you, which is great, that realize that you have a lot of room to get better. And even those that strongly agree, I think there's probably a few blind spots that you have. So I think it just shows us that we need to pay more attention to data truth. But again, a key to that is making sure that you're looking at the right data and then understanding any limitations that you may have that are not within your control. So nothing's going to be 100% accurate, but is the data as accurate as it can be, right? So I think that's really important. So hopefully when the webinar is over, we'll give you some things to think about, right? How do I improve the data truth at my company? First of all, how do I assess where it's at, right? And then let's say, where are we at? Where do we want to be? And then say, oh, I think we can come a long way if we do a little better job in these areas. And so in order to help us with that exercise, I really I did a webinar a few months ago about data truth, and I think I worked with some folks on LinkedIn, and I came up with 10 pillars of data truth, and these are just like the theory. So this is kind of what I think you should strive for, and then you can look at that versus where you're at, right? Where you stand depends on where you sit. But again, even if you think you strongly agree that you've got data truth nailed, you still can go back and really start to look at this, especially as we're right in season, right? We're probably all getting into the depths of our budgeting and planning. And it's a really good time to not just go on autopilot and really start to look at, okay, where's this data coming from? Do we need more data X, Y, Z? What are the drivers that we're using? How are our folks coming up with these numbers? Let's make sure that people aren't just rolling out numbers without any justification for doing so, especially on the cost side. So the theory data is collected from known and trusted sources. So the known source, and it's also ideal if you can validate the quality of your data. And one of the ways that we have issues in data quality is that if people are typing in data from system to system, maybe it's going through emails. And so even though it's coming from internally, I wouldn't necessarily think that's a trusted source. A trusted source and technology, again, we talked about this a little bit earlier. You should have data accuracy guidelines. And so if we have known data and we can verify, let's make sure our data reaches this level of quality. Maybe we're using a proxy, but we need to be able to relate that proxy to reality. So let's make sure that we're within X, Y, Z using historical data. Again, talked about this already. The quality of data is verifiable. And then the quality of data is ensured as it enters business systems. So we need to be, if nothing else, doing some spot checks, make sure we're not losing zeros, transposing things. Again, anytime you're manually entering data, you have risk, especially if you're re-entering data. If you're using Excel, my ERP, my BI, if these things there's no integrability, there's an issue there. And then you should clearly outline your data assumptions. And so, right? And so these assumptions, and so a lot of times when you're getting these numbers, the question is going to be asked, okay, where'd you get this data at, right? So let's push that out. Let's publish those guidelines, and let's involve folks, right, that need data and do the analysis of the data. Let's make sure that we're all on the same page. So again, the more structure that you put on around data governance, the more the more value you'll see. So you'll think, I'm really busy, I don't have time to do data governance. What I would argue, this is extremely important, and companies should spend more time on data governance. And I know when you improve the quality of the data, you're going to improve the quality of your output. And so let's take a quick peek at the last 5. Again, we want to make sure data values are the same. Changes to data value are attributable to given system users. So let's make sure that we have that version control, and let's lock cells, or whatever that might be Excel, let's lock data when we need to. Let's make sure that we're making changes. And I think a lot of the systems I see now is that you can actually put a note. Hey, I changed the data because XYZ. We need to facilitate trust among data producers and consumers, right? So we got to understand who our producers are and our consumers, and they might not have the same needs, they might not have the same incentives, which gets to my next point. We got to mitigate data politics. Sometimes there's politics going on. I want to use this, I want to use that. One of these places where I find that going is between FP&A and Treasury. And so the majority of companies I talk to, I say, is your cash forecast the same for FP&A and Treasury? And they say no. And I just shake my head and I'm like, well, why? So we want to make sure that there's one version of the truth and there doesn't need to be politics in there. Let's work together to deliver, make sure that we're all using the same data and whatever that definition of it is, our definition of the right data. And then we want to have consistent data, language, and definition guidance. So I think these 10 things are really important. Again, data is really the foundation of FP&A success. Now, one of the things that I harped on a lot already is that you need to understand your data needs, right? And so I go at this in 2 different ways. So what's the top-down data that matters? So what are the drivers of company value, and what are those at your company? And then you want to make sure you can identify, monitor, and manage KPIs that reflect the driver dynamics, and we'll go through how to do this in a minute or so. And then you have the bottom-up data that matters. Identify KPIs that reflect departmental performance that impact key drivers of company value. So having this perspective, I think, really helps you get away from this epidemic that I call of data overload. And so again, we'll make sure we've got the right data constrained, and then we can have a much better job in owning that truth. Not to say that we don't want to continually validate what those drivers are, but I think this will help us get the right perspective and just not start throwing things at the wall. And so understanding those top level drivers. So what do I mean by drivers that matter? In order to achieve your strategic objectives, again, this is a macro company level, XYZ need to happen, and or if A, B, and C happen, our progress will be derailed or accelerated. So what are the things that are going to impact us achieving our objectives? And then I get questions a lot. Are the drivers for my company, should they be industry specific, company specific? Are they company size specific? Are they company risk tolerance specific? And I wish I had a great answer for you. If I did, I would be a very rich person. But again, but if you think about it, they really shouldn't be. And one of the things that I often tell folks to focus on is that company specific. And so you really want to understand your competitive advantage, right? And so how do we measure that competitive advantage? Where is it that we do the best? That's where we really want to focus, right, on driving the value and making those metrics go in the right way. So let's understand our company advantage, because our company competitive advantage is really what's really going to be a key driver of our financial success. And so I see different numbers that people use at these macro levels, 5, 7. I mean, I see some people go higher. Some people say no more than 3 to 5. I think it just depends, right? Again, from my perspective, if you're looking at a macro, right, if you're looking at that top down, yeah, maybe 5 to 7, but I would not only use that. I think we need to look at the departmental performance and then aligning performance at the departmental level to driving our values of company success. And then I like to show that the definition of what we think is on finance professionals is really changing, and I think rightly so. And so we might want to take a look at if our drivers of company value are really all financial. We might need to take another look in the mirror, maybe not this year, but in the future, think about this. And what we're seeing more and more with companies is their top 5 value drivers customer satisfaction, customer relationships, quality of people, reputation, and brand. The only thing that we might recognize from finance is quality of business processes, but I think relating things back to your customers and your people and your brand, those are the things that matter. The more happy our customers are, the more that we deliver value, and that there's alignment between our perceived value and actual value. That's going to drive growth. If we have the right people, quality of our people, that's going to drive growth. Are our people happy? That's going to drive our growth. Do we make sure that it's our brand? Are we managing our reputation effectively? If not, we can have a huge drag on our growth. So we need to understand how to manage that. And so I think it's just interesting here. So we talked about what's the right data. So let's start to see, just do some real quick process of what you might want to think about taking a look at. Again, these will be different for your company, but just you look at the drivers. Okay, so I need data related to customer satisfaction. So what are the KPIs, right, that can help me assess where I'm at on these drivers? And so you look at, okay, data quality, how does that relate to my value drivers? It goes to quality of business process. You look at employee productivity, right? Quality of my people, and quality of business process. And so you can start to map these out. Customer pipeline and retention, our customer relationships, quality of our people. Again, I probably don't have all these arrows right, but you start to look at these KPIs. And so that starts, and sometimes you're going to have to create, right? You're going to have to do maybe some internal surveys, some customer surveys. And so the good news is that gives you control over that data, right? So you're actually getting that data yourself, you're curating that data, so that gives you a good risk of data truth. So this just starts to help you understand what data that you need. So again, we need the right data at the right time to the right people to deliver analysis that impacts decisions. We want to improve decision making, and that's really the last mile of FP&A. Improving decision making, which better decision making means it increases our company value. And then let's go a step down, right? So let's look at let's go to accounts payable. I'm a treasury person at heart, so I would like to talk about accounts payable, accounts receivable, and treasury. But again, you look at our top value drivers, right? So what kind of information do we need in order to drive performance from AP, which impacts our top line drivers? So we're taking a step down here. So average issue resolution time, that impacts our supplier relationships, impacts our customer status, so as you know. So DPO, so let's do some mapping here. And so we start to see this type of information. Then we start to get these relationships. And so we start to see, we start to look at that universe of data that matters. And so I think we have the information available. You don't want too much data, but I wouldn't want to take too narrow of a focus, because the opportunity is there. We have this data. We know that time spent resolving AP issues is going to impact our growth. And so we need to figure out how that relationship works, and we're going to need that issue. And the good news is that as we get the data relative to these departmental levels, what are we going to do? We're going to improve the performance, right, at the departmental level. And so we need to make sure that we're capturing this data, but also that we're sharing this data to the right folks. And this can help drive departmental performance, which is going to drive our company's performance. So let me go ahead and launch our next polling question here. I'm just going to ask you to share with me how you would characterize your company's understanding of the key drivers of your financial results. Would you say it's limited at best, adequate but need of improvement, good, it's becoming a key company focus, it's ideal, under constant analysis, or maybe you just don't know at this time? Again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. Those of you interested in receiving CTP or FP&A credits for the webinar today, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions in addition to answering the survey at the end of our webinar today. I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another maybe 5 to 10 seconds or so. Then we're going to take a quick peek at the results, and then we're going to shift gears a little bit into what I call business intelligence. And so we're gathering all this data. It's important. Okay, so how do we make sure that we leverage this data? How do we make sure that the data that we're getting to our company leaders has an impact, right? We want to deliver data that and data and insights that impact decisions, and this requires business intelligence, just not passing along invaluable data and metrics and reports that don't communicate with impact. So let's go ahead and close the polling question. Let's take a quick look. And of course, my reaction as an attendee might be, yeah, and where I stand depends on where I sit. But just to give us a little benchmark, it's good to see 19% of you are at the ideal stage, but I think that we can also see that we've got quite a bit of work to do. So we've probably got 36% adequate, 9% limited, 5%. So I would put those in the category of 50%. And so there's a lot of ways to improve there. And so again, go through this exercise. And if you have to go have a lot of conversations, this is the right time to do it, right? Budgeting and planning season, go have these conversations with your department managers and talk to your departmental managers and have them talk, right, to their analysts. What is it that drives your productivity? What is it that you need to see that can impact the way you do your job, that can make you more productive, that ties all the way up? So this is a great time to have these conversations, and as more conversations you have, you want their intuition and their work experience, but also back that up by data. And so the pieces of the puzzle will start to come together, and you'll start to see some common themes, and you'll start to be able to group the data together, and then you'll make sure that you really have a good handle on what are the drivers of performance. Guess what? Performance drives your company's success. So let's dive in a little bit on business intelligence. Again, and I think I talked about this, data, right? Data all day long. Analysis, of course, is important. We'll talk about that and communicating with impact. But companies really need to understand the information needs of its information consumers, right? Deliver the right information at the right time. So we might think that we're delivering the right information at the right time, but if we don't understand what the consumers of our data really need, what do our company leaders need, what do our departmental leaders need, then there's kind of a reality and perception are off. And then this is my big thing: information is only intelligent if it impacts decisions. If it doesn't impact decisions, you have to ask yourself, why am I gathering this data? Why am I giving you all this information and report if it's not impacting your decisions? If it's not, what informations do you need? And what is the accuracy, right, that we need? Sometimes you don't need 100% accuracy to make a better decision, so that helps us define our data accuracy guidelines. So just let's take a little dive again into accounts payable. It's pretty easy for people to really understand what I mean by accounts payable and the players there. So you wouldn't think that there'd be a lot of different types of information consumers, but when you really start to look at it and think about it, you have your CFOs and your controllers. They may have some overlap, but they're going to want more macro level numbers, right? They're going to look at the trends. They're going to see how is the cost of AP in general aligning, right? What's our metric there? But they're not going to really get into the weeds too much. And then we start to see finance and treasury managers. They might want metrics focused on a little bit differently in terms of working capital management, accounts payable managers, and then we start to go dig in the weeds a little bit, and then accounts payable and specialists, so the AP managers. What information am I going to be able to see that's going to be able to tell me if there are any areas of opportunity to improve the productivity of my staff? Your AP specialists and analysts, this gives them accountability. These are my metrics of success. What am I doing? What are things I can learn from? Where can I use some help? And then they push that up and say, it would be really helpful if I had this to my manager. And so you can push that up through your own chain or push that through up to your folks that own the data, hopefully your FP&A team. And so just some top level metrics, again, really relevant if you have accounts payable. But I would argue that this is a fantastic exercise to go through. And it's not that your FP&A team has to do all of this, but how about we collaborate, right, with accounts payable? How about we collaborate with accounts receivable and start to look at these metrics and ask these questions and ask them what they need, right, to do better. So what do they have? What do they need? And maybe stuff they're giving to them they don't need. Let's create customized dashboards and reports for them. Now you can do that efficiently. So just your top level, maybe your CFO controller, they may be really focused on DPO, total IP costs. One of the things that I encourage every company to look at, cost to process a single invoice. So as you're doing your planning and your forecasting and your budgeting, you know what? You're going to be a hero, right? If you start to say, hey, do you guys track the cost of process a single invoice? And then they do that, AP does that, and they're like, whoa, it costs us $30 per invoice. And then AP is going to dig in and say, ooh, we should lower that. And then it's going to take them to a place where they're going to knock a couple $100,000 off the bottom line. They're going to say, how did we know to do that? Guess what? My FP&A team. Guess what? FP&A. Guess what? FP&A team. AP now loves you, right? Now you have that very you have a good relationship. So that's why I think these things are important. And then just more generally, maybe a step down in the chain of the command of AP, where that goes to the CFO. Your health indicators, maybe your average time to process by the type of invoice, invoice exception rate. Invoices linked to purchase orders. Again, just for your information, this is more like an appendix, but if you want the slides, please let me know. It's really important that I really show you actually how to do something rather than just in theory how it's being done. And then we have focused in on the productivity indicators for those folks that are down at the front lines, number of invoice processed per day, number of issues resolved, number of invoice issues, number of payments issues. And so I hope this has kind of set the stage for you to all-encompassing, right, data, right data, right time, and really what does that mean? And I've spent a lot of time on that, but I think that's tremendously important, and I think that's a huge inherent barrier to FP&A professionals is what does that even mean, right data, right time? And so let's move on to another theme that we have, technology and analytical maturity. I think this is probably not a big surprise to everyone, but just some interesting results. So we asked folks, how modern is your FP&A analytics? Like we still have 23%, which would say very basic, 19% basic ERP module. And so we only see 1% as identifying themselves as cutting edge, learning advanced analytics. And then we have homegrown solutions. And then there's nothing wrong with Excel. Excel, it can be valuable, but again, we all know the issues. But if you look at Excel usage during planning, we see that in the 72.4% have a tremendous reliance on Excel. 75% of their usage for technology used during planning is Excel based. And so one of the big things that I see is Excel where it falls short, especially compared to other solutions, is to able to do robust scenario analysis and to take the financial intelligence from your GL and incorporate that into your planning solution. And then we have analytics maturity. Again, we just see only 6% in leading. So again, if you want more information about the context of the questions or the copy of the survey itself, actually can send you a link to link to a web page that has a BI tool, and you can actually play with the demographics and see really more aligning to what your company size and industry are. And then just more evidence from, again, the other survey I talked about, preparing to the next level FP&A, APQC, and AFP. So people use standard tools. 95% of folks are using spreadsheets. Good thing is we have some emerging tools. I'd like to see all these being used, but we see how little use there is for RPA and AI, even mobile. And so, and even data visualization and reporting. So I think we still see that we have an awful long way to go. So 61% reported that inadequate systems are the most pressing challenge, right? And so again, we have to walk before we can run, right? We need data and the right systems before we can deliver information and insights that improve decision making. And so how would you characterize your company's maturity level when it comes to FP&A tools? Again, we only see 9%, right, in advanced and leading, intermediate. And so, you can have your perception on where you need to be, but I would argue that you want to grow here to advanced and learning. And so if you're basic, maybe it's a two-step process. What's your journey? How do I get from basic to intermediate? So what do I need to improve? Maybe you need to improve probably need to improve your data, right? Is that the first step? Maybe I need to improve my people. Maybe I need to improve the analytical skills, right? What about my technology? So let's look at how we get from basic to intermediate, right? And then let's see where this journey goes. This journey might take a little longer, but as your company grows and becomes more complex and you go across borders and you want to have business agility, this is where you want to be. And so here's also, I think, speaks a little bit to some of the technological and analytical immaturity. So what practices are you currently leveraging? So if you were to talk to people, you would assume everyone's doing rolling forecasts, right? And everyone's doing scenario planning, and everyone's doing activity-based budgeting. And so we look at 63% of people are using rolling forecasts, only 50% scenario planning, 48% activity-based budgeting, only 42% driver-based budgeting. And I think these numbers are actually pretty good and a little bit higher than what I would expect. And so you just kind of see, like, maybe you're not doing these things, well, you're not alone, right? But again, you have to look at what's the value. And some of these things are obviously, they go together, right? If you want to do driver-based planning the right way, you need to be able to do scenario planning, and rolling forecasts is usually hand in hand with driver-based planning. But I think it just kind of shows where we're at. So let's take a step back. I do want to get back real quickly to the reporting side and just show us kind of the issues and kind of hit that again, because I think that's really important in getting people the right information that they need. And so this is just something might be interesting to print out and just think about how your company does things. Again, we need to understand our consumers. Multiple times we have data coming from a lot of different places. We have manual extraction, we have inefficient technology, we send the same reports, and then what happens? More insight, more reports, right? And you can't drill down. What does it look like when it's done right? Right? We're automatically extracting the data. We're doing some automation in terms of the reports. We're segregating customizable dashboards. And then, so you just see that with the right people and technology. Again, we want to break the cycle. A big part of breaking the reporting cycle, which I would say reporting turns into intelligence, is that you need to understand your consumers. And then if you look at it, the right technology is really what helps inform better decision. And so when you're looking at the technology landscape that you have, you want to look at, do I have the systems available to let me do accurate, timely forecasting? How are we doing in budgeting? Do we have the right reporting and dashboarding? What about analytics? Workforce planning is always a key driver. What about consolidation? Do we have scenario planning? We've talked a lot about intelligent planning. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then collaboration. So the technology should facilitate all of these different areas. And some of the leading solutions out there, they have specific modules and areas that you can get into that touch on all of these. Of course, there's interrelationships here, but these are things that you want to look for, and these are the things that drive the ROI. And so we talked about how we really would like to look for something that I've talked about the drivers and planning. I guess goes without saying, hopefully that we want to have this done in a dynamic planning environment, because we want to be able to react and not have a strategic anchor. We've done webinars about that in the past, but here's something that I think that you'd want to look for if you're looking for a more comprehensive solution. This is a tremendous diagram. I love this. So does it extend your general ledger? Do you have automated budget planning? Do you have real-time KPIs? Is it efficient consolidation and reporting? Do you have dynamic analysis and discovery? And this is what I really think is important, scenario-based forecasting. And so these are some of the things that I'm seeing out in the marketplace. Again, you'd be surprised how many solutions don't do this. It really doesn't extend your GL into your solution. So when I change something in my scenario, I can see the impact on every single department or every line item, and I can see the impact that has immediately on the income statement, the balance sheet, and really drive in there. You want to look for mitigation of formulas, macros, and links. And then reports and dashboards are dynamic and self-service and pre-built. So I think we've made the case, and not shockingly, that the right technology is important. But again, you got to walk before you can run. So we got to have the right data, we got to have the right people, right? And then we got to make sure that we have the right technology. And this is, in my mind, what the right technology looks like. And so we've given you, I've probably rained on your parade for today. But the good news is the future of FP&A, there is hope. And so from our survey respondents from the FP&A Empowerment Survey, FP&A delivers high strategic value. That 42%, believe it or not, that's a really big number, and strongly agree. That's a big number, has a positive impact on the bottom line. We got 46%, 22% strongly agree, and then insights offered influence decisions of the company, which I would like to see higher, but you say that we at least people agree that it does. So 80, 90% of the folks agree that insights offered were influencing decisions. I would argue that I think that number is a little high, but I think that we can do a better job. And then we also need to look at measuring how we're impacting those decisions. And so one of the things that I want to circle back on a little bit about the pillar of FP&A success, we talked about the technology, the data process. Let's talk about the people. And so just some interesting information from the APQC and AFP study. So you look at the team member skills that you have. So I said we need to make sure that we have our folks with the right skill set in our FP&A team. And so we look at the top 3 technological skills, data management. I think this is where we want to be, but I don't think most of us are there yet. Predictive analytics, I would say performance management is equally as important. Financial business modeling, and so these are things where you say your company might have a little bit different, but it's something that you want to pay attention to. So, what would I say are my areas? Okay, where am I at, right? Where do I need to get to? Do I want to train folks up, or do I need to bring some more folks in? Or maybe I just need to engage folks from other departments, right? So we can make sure that we're delivering the most valuable. And then, of course, we look at top 5 soft skills, and I think this is right on point, business partnering. And I think this is something that needs to be taught. And so we'll talk about that here a little bit. Some great content in the next few slides from my friends at the Business Partnering Institute. Anders Lou Lindberg, if you don't follow him on LinkedIn, he's a fantastic resource, and he's really been leading the drive in this area and sharing what they've done at Maersk in order to put this in as a formal function. And at some point, it's extremely valuable for you to do that. But if nothing else, you should understand what business partnering means, teach your folks what that is, and really make sure that they understand and have the skills to do that. And so if we look at this in terms of finance, again, this is where I go to the end, right? I go to the dessert. We want to optimize business performance, right? From FP&A, we want to influence decisions, right? How do we do that? We need to create valued insights. We need to build trusted relationships. We need to communicate with impact, right? Trusted relationships. We need to know what information people need, why they need it, when they need it. We need to know how to deliver that to them in a way that is maybe a dashboard that helps them make good decisions. We want to communicate with impact. We want to give them what they want, but we want to be able to point things out that need to be pointed out. We need to give them the ability to drill down. So we need to influence decisions, which optimize business performance. This is where we need to really focus, is how are we influencing decisions. Of course, we need to make sure that we're making our decisions better, but at the end of the day, this is what it's all about in terms of planning, budgeting and planning, is we want to optimize business performance. And so sometimes we may need to do a little culture shift here, change the mindset of finance, FP&A, whatever you'd like to call it. We need to get everyone across the company. We'll start in-house with FP&A and finance. We need to move from a mindset from a cost center to a profit center. So we want to start to think about, how do you maximize the value creation? Instead of efficiency, let's look at effectiveness. Let's not just mitigate risk. What are the right risks it takes? Let's not focus on reporting. Let's focus on insights and recommendations. Now, we talked a lot about data. We need to get the data right, but let's make sure that we spend enough time. Let's allocate our time to insights and recommendations. Instead of understanding the numbers, how about we understand our business? And then let's go to that growth mindset. And so what are some of the inherent barriers that we hear all the time? We have a lack of time, focusing on what do we talk about? When we start to look at how much time we're spending on non-value-add activities, let's give you part of your day back. Let's make time, right? We focus on cost, not value. That's part of the mind shift we need to do. Let's move that from a cost center. We're not a cost of doing business. We're a value creation center. What about the people? Again, give people their time. Just understand what people's value is, right, to driving performance. Sometimes you have a lack of focus, so let's put some structure around it. You don't make it concrete. Well, let's look at the ROI of making it concrete. So I think we can all get over these roadblocks, and these are kind of some inherent barriers. And so, again, have a conversation. Ask your folks in FP&A, do we have trouble working with other departments? Why is that? And let's start to have these conversations and remove these inherent barriers. So just real quickly, again, much more information on this at the BPI, but just a structured framework from finance, and the way they put it, I think, is pretty compelling. The why, where, what, and how of what a business partner does. So we need to explain to people what a business partner does. And what we're trying to do from our finance and FP&A, we're going to combine business with finance. And then we have 6 categories of activities, right, that we engage in: data, reports, analysis, insights. We want to focus on influence and impact. And then we have a business partnering success for pillars: technical, partnering, analysis of leadership. And so in terms of the why, where, what, how, why do we have a business partnering role? We need to explain to people the impact, the value that that has to them in the company. Where, right? What do we need to do to create value? I mentioned some of it's going to be understanding the needs of our folks and when they need it, right down the line across our department. What are the activities that we perform? What can we do to make a difference? And then how do we deploy our knowledge? So how do we take what folks need and give that to them? And I think that comes down to communicating with impact. A few key closing thoughts. I think companies would do well to assess where they stand, right? I think we saw this: time allocation, data and technology maturity, and the business partnering to steps in defining the optimizing the strategic value of FP&A. So you really need to take that good look in the mirror, right? And so you'll start to see the opportunity there. And then let's start to look at how we get there in terms of people, process, and technology. You should identify and understand and manage key drivers of value at the company level and at the departmental level. I've given you a framework to do that. Happy to have a much more in-depth conversation with you about how companies are doing that. And then this may seem like common sense, but I think it's something that we all need to keep top of mind, especially as we're going through budgeting and planning for 2020. FP&A success is driven by effective business partnering, the right data, the right systems and processes. And we're trying to facilitate business agility and impact decisions. And then I think we've shown that another key foundation is leveraging driver-based planning and forecasting that leverages scenario analysis is really going to fuel our company's success. I apologize, we don't have time for Q&A. I'll definitely follow up with everyone after the webinar, any questions we did not get to. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question as I close the webinar here in the next few closing comments. And so one of the things that I would like to share with you as we have our final polling question up is that Treasury webinars and FP&A webinars, we're going to deliver the first ever So if you're interested in learning more, I've got a hyperlink there, and you can also send me an email as well. And so let me go ahead. I think we had a little network glitch here. So go ahead. Hopefully you can respond now. So I think the connection has rebooted, even though I've got a hardwired Ethernet connection. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to give you a couple more seconds to vote. The last polling question. I know you don't want to miss out on your CPE credits. And so I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question. Again, if you're interested in learning more about the virtual conference, please. Finally, thank you to audience for your valuable time. We sincerely appreciate the support of each and every one of you. Make the rest of your day great, everyone.